Hey, Nort, how you doing?
Keith could speak before I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
On that link there. Number 4 is the call to order. So at this time, Ms. Steves, if you would determine if we have a quorum present.
Yes, Mr. Bellingham, we do.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cavalier, can you hear us okay?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Bellingham.
Very good, thank you. At this time, I ask you to remove your hat, stand, and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, for everyone's information about the meeting tonight, first of all, Treasurer Courtney Cavalier is currently located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a public location in Opus Hall, University of St. Thomas, 1000 LaSalle Avenue, Minneapolis, Minnesota. She'll be fully participating as a voting board member in the school board meeting via Google. Also, due to that fact that she is voting online here, is that all action items will be roll call tonight. All actions will be roll call. If we go to number 5, we have approval of the agenda. So I entertain a motion for approval of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lechtenberg. We have a motion and a second for approval of agenda. Any discussion? Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes.
Do you want a roll call?
I'm sorry, thank you. Didn't take me long to forget that, did it? Okay. Ms. Steves?
Courtney Cavalier.
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg.
Aye.
Richard Olson.
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud.
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. Number 6, school board public comments guidelines. This is an opportunity for residents, business and property owners, parents, students, and employees of the Faribault Public Schools to address the board. You must sign up in person at the board meeting and address the board from the podium, that table there. Members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. After being recognized by the chair, each individual will identify themselves and the group they represent, if any. Please state your reason for addressing the board. This is not a time to debate an issue, but for the board to hear your comments. Public comment is not available at work sessions, closed sessions, or special meetings of the school board. The Minnesota Government Data Practices Act prohibits comments about specific student or staff members even without naming them in open session. This includes the public comment portion of our meeting. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific student, staff, or to a specific matter, such input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, such as the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. Anyone interested in making a public comment will be asked to complete an information card before the meeting starts, providing their name, address, and topic of their comment. All comments must conform to School Board Policy 206, which is available for review on the district website at www.faribault.k12.mn.us. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to make comments on one specific topic. Each topic will have a total of 15 minutes allowed for comments. So with that, signing up here, and Ms. Steves will be our timer tonight. I have Jim Johnson. Welcome and good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to talk, school board members. Today I'm here to talk about the cooperative that affects the boys soccer team. You've seen me here before. I've had discussions on this again. I just wanted to kind of highlight a few points. Again, my name is Jim Johnson. To give you a little background on me, I'm a former boys high school JV coach and also recently retired youth soccer association coach as of yesterday. But I've been a Faribault Booster member and a supporter of this community for many, many years. You could kind of say that there's green blood coursing through my veins. But I'm not here to talk about my Falcon spirit, but to ask this board to consider to keep the cooperative for the boys soccer team. The decision will be a very strong and impactful one if the resulting relationship between the two schools are dissolving. And some of that impact is, one, the Faribault boys soccer team currently would lose 5 varsity players, 3 of which are starters at this point. This is one of the strongest teams that Faribault has seen in a long time. Taking 5 varsity players away would weaken this team and also potential opportunity for the Faribault athletes that attend the Faribault High School to participate in a state tournament, which we haven't done in a long time. So it impacts school spirit. A reduction in numbers also continues to shrink the numbers of the teams that Faribault supports. We used to support 4 teams. We're currently at a state where we're supporting 3. If we dissolve this cooperative, we potentially might have to go down to 2 teams and have to go to a system where we're cutting Faribault high school athletes just to support 2 teams. And obviously, if the BA students are to leave, they wouldn't have enough to support a single team on their own. So again, more impactful to the families and the players. In time, the program won't survive. We've seen numbers dwindle and unable to support growth through the younger programs. Programs will eventually fade away and die or dwindle to a point where they're not even active or impactful to school spirit. I want to talk a little bit about the 5 students that are currently in the varsity program, not throughout the entire program. There's a ton of kids that are out there that are playing soccer, but the 5 kids that have impacted me. You got 5 students. They've got to start over in a new sport. They've got a few weeks to decide whether they're going to be in a sport or they're going to try to just leg it out and be a student for 3 months. These boys have dedicated their falls, their summers to soccer. They wore the green uniform. They represented Faribault Falcons. So again, rather than supporting them, we're turning our cheek and allowing them to participate in nothing at all. And I promise you, they do also have green in their veins. But the biggest impact for me is brotherhood. The vast majority of these boys have played together for the past 10 years, and I know this better than anyone because I've been their coach. They've amassed 3 state championships together.
Excuse me, could you wrap it up shortly, please?
Absolutely. 3 times they took second in state, and they took third at least once. So they've been to state vast majority of those 10 years. To take that away, it impacts the kids, but it also impacts all these families that have helped sacrifice their time to see them through. In closing, to me, there's a lot of reasons why, keeping this relationship, or dissolving this relationship is a bad idea, but I can't help to ask the question, You know, why would we make such an abrupt move? Why not consider the personnel, the team, and the family impacts of this vote? Why not come up with a long-term solution that allows the kids to be grandfathered in?
Please
that are
conclude, Mr. Johnson.
currently in the program to play out their time, set a future date that kids that aren't involved in the program now will have an idea that they can't participate in soccer, but the kids that are currently in the system are grandfathered. We ask you to consider this for a future plan if you're dead set on dissolving it. Otherwise, please continue to support this cause. The Faribault soccer program needs it.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next, we have Nemo Hussein. She need an interpreter. She signed up and these two didn't before the meeting. No. So no. So the way this process will work, so with the interpreter, correct? Yes. Okay, so we will pause when you're interpreting what she has said, we will pause that, and so the 3 minutes will be true to your 3 minutes directly to the board from what she said there. So.
aniga minidka la ii bilaabayaa 3 daqiiqo saan iyaga warka ugu sheego ingiriis ahaan ad Soomaali aan igala hadla Soomaaliga waxaad ka dhadaan Soomaalida
horta way mahadsan yihiin dhammaantood waan soo dhaweeyeen dadkan waxaan rabay inaan ku darsado fikrad ah waxaan haysanaa ilmahaasayta wax program uma haysano programkaas wuxuu inagala qodan karo horta yaan isku dhaqina bal inta
First of all, thank you very much. The community, Faribault community, welcomed us here as a Somali community, and we appreciate that.
waxaan rabnaa ilmahaas aan haysano oo qaarna aysan hadin hada fiiriyahay qaarna ay riyal u jirin oo fudud yihiin programmadooda aan rabnaa inaan wax ku darsano isku
We have disabled kids who cannot talk and many different disabilities, and we would like to add something. We don't have a lot of facilities that we need, and I would like to add to that.
ilmaha waxay sameeyaan badan anima haysta laakiin dadka waalidiin badan oo ka cabanaya ilmaha qaar iyo qaar aamusan baa la isku dhex daraa inaa ilmihiisaasna looga bedelo oo qaab anag aan rabna in waxna looga qabto
They put it in one category, the school puts one category, kids who can't speak, kids who are hyper, kids who have a different disabilities seems to be going to one class, and we would like to have a varieties of different disabilities because of one is severe and the other one is not so severe, so we'd like to have a different sections and different grades and different classes.
tan kale aan rabna inaan ku darsano waxaa rabnaa sessionka waalidiinta anaga inta badan dadka wadanka ugu nool kala ma nihin qaaran baabuur wadi karin qaarana shaqooyin leh waxaan rabnaa inta badan waxaana lagu rabay iskuulka inta hareerihiisa ama dhinaca ka jirto iskuulka inay qaataan ilmaha dad saasaa jiraan oo dhibkaas haysto in dhankaasna naloo fiiriyo wax nagala qaban karo dhanka basaas waalidiinta qaar shaqa aada qaar ilmaha aan wadi karin gaariyaasha marka waxaan rabnaa dhankaas in naloo qiimeeyo naloo fiiriyo qofkii u baahan reerkaas in wax
Transportation. We have difficulties through transportation, the busing for the school. Some parents, they go to work early morning, some they go at night time, and kids, they don't have transportation for that matter. They have difficulties, maybe perhaps like when they are coming early morning.
inay qaarkood xataa lugeeyaan
And some of the kids, they work through school, and in winter time, parents don't have cars, and they have difficult the kids to come to school because of their working from long distance to come to the school. And we would like the buses or the transportation to look into that if they can help us. We're a new immigrant, We're not like the country people, the people we come to this country, they are maybe more sufficient. They have facilities that they can provide. We don't have that, and we would like to have to look into that.
waan ku mahadsanyahay doodka waan dhiibanay tan kale waxaan rabnaa ilmaha aqoon-maluudka inaan anaka bukaatanba aan ogoleyn oo albaab looga furin uusan jirin oo nala dadaalo sidii ilmahana looga saari lahaa galaasyadeeda ilaa loo shaqeynay.
Thank you very much for listening to me today. The other thing I'm going to add is gays. Our culture, our religion doesn't allow us to have gays, and we don't want our children to be taught in the class at school.
inay nalooga saaro galaasyo kale ama barnaamijyo kalena loogu sameeyaa.
If there is that program going on, we would like that time that the school is talking about it or the class is talking about LBG communities and gays, they should remove our students from the class.
Waa mahadsantihiin.
And thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Linda Moore. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Linda Moore. I'm a concerned citizen. I have some very serious concerns, 3 of them tonight. The first one is, I don't know, have you heard about the licensing requirements for Minnesota teachers that may be put into effect? The Professional Educators Licensing and Standards Board are finalizing new requirements for the licensing of Minnesota teachers. It's Rule Draft RD 4615. These standards will incorporate Marxist principles into schools using teachers, not necessarily curriculum, as the instruments. Did you know that the ultimate goal of the Marxist communists is to overthrow the society by promoting conflict? Look at the congressional record in 1963 of communist goals. And I had it here, but I don't see it, but it was a whole sheet. The green portion, almost the total sheet the one sheet has already been accomplished. Do you really want the overthrow of our society? Did you know that the new Marxism rests on racial identity and the conflict that ensues? Secondly, what about social studies standards? Faribault made the news in Thinking Minnesota with a quote, "How did this extremist ideology born of the Third World Liberation Front make its way from San Francisco and Berkeley to elementary schools in Litchfield and Faribault, Minnesota?" The author predicts with these standards there will be upheaval in our schools. What is going to happen when the parents and voters find out about this, when all of them do? You know, this is terrible. This could be a death sentence for public schools. Third, did you know that critical race theory is a theoretical perspective that also promotes gender identity? CRT is not taught, but it does serve as an ideological basis for the classroom and teaching. It is a Marxist communist philosophy, and it is in our Faribault public schools as demonstrated by the HYA survey, and I hold it up here. From this survey, one parent stated, "The first week in school, my daughter's teacher gave the students a form to fill out which asked what pronouns they identify with. Another respondent also spoke of declaring gender pronouns. This is CRT. No, this is not being taught, but it is being indoctrinated. It's a basis. It's a philosophical basis for the classroom. By the way, promoting gender ideology are communist goals. For example, goal 26, and I think I sent each of you those 3 sheets before. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Also from this survey, one district employee responded, "We are failing our students and our community by being forced into CRT." Did you know that the maps Great Lakes Equity Center training has a section on, I'm almost done, vocabulary and language that includes queer, intersex, transgender. The vehicle's through the teachers. As taxpayers and voters, we do not want this. The taxpayers and voters are waking up to this reality. I'm only the spokesman, but there are many more like me. This is really terrible because I'm
Please
almost
conclude.
done.
Please
I-
conclude.
Okay, I watched, it was on, it was a show on Sunday morning, I think it was called, but they said parents are leaving because of this, and they're homeschooling. What is going to happen for Faribault Public Schools? And this is what, those three concerns, I'm very concerned about it, and I'm not sure what to do about it. Oh, by the way, this is the communist goals that have already been completed.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Thank you.
Next, we have Keith Kramer. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, and thank you all for your service to our community. My name is Keith Kramer, and like all of you, I care deeply about our schools and making Faribault a great place to live, work, and raise children. To this end, like you, I volunteer my time with Rotary, the Chamber, and our own soccer association to try to make Faribault a better place. I also have 3 children attending Faribault Public Schools, and my comments today surround the potential levy and funding our schools. I acknowledge the challenges that we currently face. We have a lot of new faces around the district in key roles, projections of enrollment that are slightly down, all coupled with economic uncertainty. However, there are reasons to be very optimistic. New leadership with our superintendent position, high school principal, middle school principal, and other key positions bring new perspectives and a general excitement of positive change. Collaborations with other entities such as the Chamber for important items like our 7-period day, pathways for our high school students, and also Cradle to Career show that we are making good progress. So the mission of the Faribault Public Schools is to provide a high quality and equitable education that nurtures, inspires, challenges, and empowers all students to engage and grow as learners and citizens. From my understanding, the recommendation from our study conducted from Baker Tilly suggests a proposed ballot question that would raise taxes around $85 to $90 for an average home. The projections are that even if we can get the existing levy renewed and the additional levy approved, we will still be in a position of making cuts, and these likely to our teaching team. I view this from 2 main perspectives, our teachers and our students. From either perspective, would I feel like we are making progress towards our mission if in the best case scenario we're looking to cut key team members and programs, and in the worst case scenario look at significant cuts over multiple years. So, can we add a 3rd ballot question that says something to the effect of, this amount will fully fund our operating budget for the upcoming year? I would like to see us give our children the best chance of having high quality education by providing awesome teachers with manageable class sizes, great curriculum, and the ability to participate in programs that provide life skills. If we make cuts, I'm not sure how we will accomplish all of these important items, and we will put our administration in the tough spot of playing defense at a time that they should be focused on playing offense and hiring top talent. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Nort Johnson. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Nort Johnson, and I've got my citizen Nort Johnson hat on as well as my chamber executive hat on tonight. I want to make sure that you're aware of that. It's not often I get to wear both. I'm going to echo a bit of what Keith has to say. Our Chamber Executive Committee met and talked about what the economic and financial situation of the school district looks like, and we fully understand how dire the situation is. As Keith mentioned, even if we pass a minimum referendum, we still have to make cuts, and we're going to need to make cuts the following year. And I want to talk about some really good news things that have happened over the last few years. Keith mentioned those, but that 7-period day was a significant undertaking, and the chamber partnered to help make sure that this issue passed, and we got a 7th period back in the high school. That cascaded into the H2C programming. Just today, we were at South Central College with our H2C partners looking at new programming that's coming in right now, a Snap-on certification measurement program that has come as a result of the 7-period day. Now, this costs a little bit of money, and it's exactly what I can tell you our membership is looking for. All right? These H2C programming. And following up right now, as you know, we've got a cradle to career effort that's also going on. These things cost money. We're very fortunate that the Chamber of Commerce is going to house a full-time position for the next year, helping with the H2C programming. And we're doing our part, seeking out continued funding to ensure that we can have that important position continue for another 4 years past that. So the partnership with the Chamber continues to be there. So what I want to share with you today is that we must go forward to the voters and ask them for the meaningful amount and give them the full story about what the financial situation for the school district is. The idea of fully funding the school district, ensuring that we continue these important pathways in health sciences, construction trades, engineering, and mechanical engineering. We need these. They're going right now. We just can't risk losing that momentum that we have with South Central College and our business community to these cuts. Please be assured that we'll be there to support you in getting the funding that we need to continue the work in Faribault. I want to make sure everybody also is full on aware. Funding per pupil in Faribault as compared to other districts is already rock bottom. We have districts like White Bear Lake that have 2.5 times the funding per student that Faribault does. I think that you all are doing a fantastic job in extremely tight circumstances with your budgets. We'll do everything that we can to make sure that the community understands those circumstances and helps you pass a levy to continue the funding for this and other important programming that you have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That concludes our public comment for tonight. We'll now move on to agenda item number 7. 7A is recognition, awards, and presentations. We have a school board interpretation plan with Ms. Katie Schultz. Welcome.
So, we have an interpretation plan for school board meetings, which I'm thrilled to share with you tonight. So, I'm supposed to have a clicker and be able to click this forward, and there's nothing up there. There it is. Oop. I don't have it in front of me, so you got to put it on the screen. There we go. All right. We have 2 different plans. We have a plan for live interpretation during the school board meetings. Our family and community engagement specialists will be available for live interpretation at all of the regular school board meetings. I had a large group of them here last meeting. I was hoping I could introduce them to you, but you saw them in the back of the room with me. They are some of the most fantastic employees we have in our district. Somali and Spanish will be the 2 main languages that we focus on for the school board meetings. Other languages can be interpreted as well, but that will have to be on request, as that isn't as common as Somali and Spanish here in Faribault. Parents will have 2 choices in the location that they would like to be. If they would like to be here in the Falcon Room with the school board, we have interpretation devices. The interpreter will actually be in the Garfield Room, and the parents will have headphones on. The interpreter will be speaking to them through the headphones. If they would like to be in the Garfield or the Washington room, they can be present with the interpreters in the room. We just want to make sure that they feel like they're included in this process, and so we don't want to just segregate them to a different room if that's not what they would like to do. If they want to participate in the community comment as they did tonight, the interpreter will be here with them. One of the things that I wanted the board to consider is the 3-minute time limit. I think you've already had conversations about that. When we're using an interpreter, extending that time is pretty essential so that everything can be said, since it has to be said twice with the interpreter there. For recordings of the school board meetings, all live subtitles have to be in English. We thought we had solved that problem. We thought we had worked through it, but it just doesn't work to have English, Somali, and Spanish subtitles on the live board meeting. Thankfully, the recorded version the subtitles can be translated very easily. I have put together a brochure, and Casey told me if I clicked on it, it would go to it. Nope. So you might not be able to see it tonight, but I'll bring copies of that for you. I created a brochure that was a how-to. So if I am going to the recorded meeting, it walks you through step by step how to turn the subtitles on and then how to translate them into the language that you would like. There are many languages available on YouTube for the subtitles. I'm going to have that brochure translated into Spanish and Somali as well so that families can see that or access that. Here it is. So this gives the step-by-step directions with some graphics to make it easier to figure out how to get it in the correct language. So that is our plan in a nutshell. Any questions or comments, thoughts?
Board members, question, Mr. Olson.
Is there a cost to this?
Zero cost.
Zero cost.
I shouldn't say that. Once the school year starts, there will be zero cost. Our faces are the only cost. The Family and Community Engagement Specialists, since they will be here tonight, I am paying them hourly to be here. But once the school year starts, they can flex that time and not work a couple hours during the day to be here at night. There might be a minimal cost. We only have one set of interpretation devices. So if we're going to offer live interpretation in both Spanish and Somali, we will have to purchase another set of interpretation devices, and I think they run about $600.
Dr.
That could
Robichaud.
come out of the-
I'm sorry, Mr. Olson, go ahead and finish.
That could come out of our technology budget?
I haven't talked budgets yet, but I would guess Casey won't like me
That-
promising that, but yeah,
But
we'll figure it out.
that is technology.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll figure out the bucket
Talk
that it
to
comes out
Casey
of.
about
Yeah.
Dr. Robichaud.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I appreciate your concern about the cost, Mr. Olson. Aren't we obligated by statute to provide interpreting services at a public meeting?
I don't know, by law, our families are supposed to understand what is going on. So in my interpretation, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Other questions, board members?
I find this very impressive. Nice job.
Thank you.
I will say practice of the board here probably since, well, April, May, maybe even March, since one of my chief duties as vice chair is to keep time, is I have paused as we did tonight, when the interpreter was receiving the information, and then we just record the timing is actually just the information from the interpreter to the board and back. So that is practice, and I think it's very good practice
I
like
think
that.
that's
So,
very, very good.
anything else? Very good.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Next, board members, will move on to item 8. Consider approval of Resolution 23-03 approving a tax increment financing plan for Tax Increment Financing District Number 17, River Chase Apartments in Development District Number 1 in the city of Faribault. So I think what might be best to do is have a motion and a second, and then we'll have our discussion with that. So I will entertain a motion for approval of Resolution 23-03.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Robichaud,
Second.
and a second by Ms. Steves. So now discussion. So Mr. Benty, I don't know if I'll throw this over to you, or if you have someone from the city here to come up and, thank you. I should have
She's on
met
her
you
way up
before the
right
meeting.
now.
I did not. I apologize for that. So.
Good afternoon. My name is Deanna Kennan. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director for the City of Faribault. This is my first time in front of the school board, so thank you for having me. I also have Jason Arsvold with us. He is the city's financial consultant and works with Ellers and has been actively involved with assisting the city through the establishment of TIF districts, the ones in front of you tonight, as well as all of the TIF districts that we have done as a community in recent years. Just for a little bit of background, I know you are all very much aware of the housing shortage that exists within the city of Faribault. We have worked very diligently, and I tried to articulate it in the letter. We have worked very diligently at the city to try to address this need. The lack of housing has affected all of our employers. Currently, there's hundreds of jobs available with our industries that go unfilled because they struggle attracting and retaining employees because of the lack of available housing. We understand that there's housing needs throughout the entire from rentals, from affordable to market rate to home ownership options. The home ownership options are a much more difficult puzzle to solve due to how developers make their money on those. The multifamily one is a puzzle that there are existing tools that help bring these projects forward. Within the last few years, we have successfully been able to add well over 300 apartments, new apartments into this community. Each one of those projects, the three big projects, have required tax increment financing. We've established a soils and redevelopment district, we've established a redevelopment district, and we've established a housing development district. All of those have taken place without me or Jason coming before the board, and it's because of the type of district that we have used. The reason we're before you now, which we haven't been before you as it pertains to TIF for decades, is because we're looking at using an economic development workforce housing district. A number of years ago, the state legislature modified the TIF laws to allow the economic development district to be used to address workforce rental housing. And to do that, there's a number of tests that have to be done, including letters from employers demonstrating that there's this need and that it's affecting our employers, and resolutions by the school board and by the county board regarding the TIF plan. And so that's why we're before you tonight, is we have been working with two different developers on projects that we are looking to establish economic development workforce housing TIF districts, which are a shorter district. Jason can get into some of those details about how the TIF works and the duration of those districts. And to do that, we're currently updating our vacancy rate analysis. That was prepared in 2018 by our Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and at that time we found that the rental vacancy rate in the city of Faribault was less than 1%. Less than 1%. And when you accounted for a 12-mile radius to include Owatonna and the city of Northfield, that vacancy rate was only 3%, 3.2%. A healthy vacancy rate is 5%. Actually, it was 1.3%, I'm sorry, 1.3% when you included Northfield and Owatonna. And again, that healthy vacancy rate is 5%. And so we are in the process of updating these numbers. We know that that vacancy rate is still there. We updated a vacancy analysis about a year and a half ago to show that even with all the new housing, all the new apartment development that has happened, there is still a need. It's just that has just started to scratch the surface. So as we've been working with the developers, the two sites, we'll talk about 17 first, which is the River Chase Apartments. That is being proposed on city-owned land by the Viaduct downtown. It would be a 77-unit market rate apartment project, about a $13 million investment by the developers. And we've calculated what that total tax increment would be collected over the life of the district, and then what that school board, or what the school amount of that increment, which would be attributed to the school board. Since that's the item in front of you now, is 17, we can talk about the specifics of the plan or the TIF district and answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Vice Chair and board members, I'm Jason Arsvold with Ellers, and as Deanna said, we've been working with them to create these new districts. Fundamentally, why we've had to do it is the cost to build this housing is more than the revenue that comes in to pay for it. And so what we're doing is solving a financial gap to allow these projects to move forward. And the city has to make a finding to that effect in its plans that you have before you. And while we've identified the amount that would be attributable to the school and taxes over the life of the district, the amount that the TIF plan actually says would be generated is zero. And the reason for that is because without this assistance coming from this district, these projects simply can't move forward. So the statute requires us to calculate what that would be, but I think the two important things for you all to know is that one, these projects wouldn't be here generating any taxes without this assistance that we're talking about, and two, that when a project goes into a tax increment district, it doesn't negatively impact your existing stream of funding that you have as a school. It will not impact that whatsoever. So the districts, as Deanna said, are economic development districts. They would go for a duration of 9 years and they have to stop. It would allow the project to get built, and then once it comes out of the district, that tax base is there and available to help with your tax rate as you fund schools into the future. In addition, what will happen is that these properties are currently exempt, and so, particularly 17, 18, I believe too, right, exempt? Yes. And so there will be some value placed on that property when it goes into the district. It won't be taxed at zero. That's what we call the base value. That will flow to all the jurisdictions. We'll capture then the value on top of that from the building. That's the incremental value, and for a period of 9 years. And again, that increment isn't going to be there unless the project receives the kind of assistance that we've been talking about here for these particular projects. So, we've got a budget in the TIF plan that you have in front of you, but that's an inflated budget. The assistance that will go to these projects is something a little less than that, but again, it will be limited to that 9 year duration, and we're actually still working through all the details on that to give you an exact number, but in any case, 9 years will be the maximum duration. I missed.
We're happy to answer.
Yeah, I don't want to, we could go into, a lot of detail here. We thought it best to just, if you have questions about all of this, we could stand for those.
Excellent, thank you. So discussion or points of question? Dr. Rocho.
I know trying to explain a tax increment area is far more complicated than what you two have done so far. Just have a question. Are the developers restricted as to how much they can charge for the rental of those units? You said that there is not a profit to get to that point. So if I have 70 apartments, am I restricted as to what I can charge for those apartments based on this TIF requirement?
Right, so one of the simple answer is no. There is a type of district, a housing district, which Faribault has used, that does income restrict the folks that can live there, and that's how that qualifies to be a tax increment district. What the workforce housing district is attempting to accomplish is building housing for one of the jobs that Deanna's talking about in your town here are well-paying jobs. And many of those don't qualify for the types of housing in a housing tax increment district. And you're not the only community experiencing this phenomenon. It's happening statewide. And that's why the legislature enacted this type of a tax increment district. It allows you to use the tool to fill the developer's gap. And we go through an analysis to make sure their profit is limited to reasonable and acceptable amounts. And then the tenants that live there do not need to be income restricted. They can have incomes at any amount, live there, and there's no rent restriction. And the idea is that because these folks are making a salary that's enough to afford the housing, it's just not getting built in many of these communities. That's where this district comes into play.
And I think one of the important parts to point out is that, like Jason said, the plan is the maximum. So when he says it's inflated, it shows what the maximum would be. The process that Ellers goes through with each and every TIF project is they go through something we call right-sizing the project, where they go line by line through the developer's pro formas to ensure that the developers aren't being overly compensated as part of these projects. It's expected, and it should be, that developers make money on every project that they do, and there are acceptable ranges, acceptable ranges associated with that. And so the effort that they go through is to ensure that all of their numbers are within those acceptable ranges, and that their numbers are not overly inflated or accounted for, and they really right-size that project to make sure that from the city's perspective, that's why we bring them on board, is that from the city's perspective, we're not overly compensating a developer on any of the projects that we look to use public financing to support.
I think one thing I'll just add briefly to follow up on that is that what is in front of you tonight is simply the plan for creation of the district. So that would allow the district to actually be created. There's a separate agreement that the city will enter into with the developer that directs the assistance that will come out of this district in a manner that Deanna just described.
Anything else, board members? Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I've invested in real estate for about 30 years. I'm still trying to understand why they can't make money. When you build something, you make money. How do you fill that gap? How do you explain that?
Sure, I can take that. So, we this effort to look at new housing in Faribault goes back, 8 years or so. We started talking about that actively with the city's Economic Development Authority and the city itself and the development community. And one of the challenges is that the market rents for housing in Faribault, when we started this, this isn't going to mean a lot to everybody here, but maybe like $1.15 a square foot. Okay, and so, if you've got a 1,000 square foot building, that's, $1,100 a month in rent. Well, one of the challenges at the time was that in order for a developer to make money at those rent levels, they needed to make money on a new apartment complex, they needed rent more in the area of about $2 a square foot to pay for all the debt that they're going to take out, the operating expenses and the return on investment to the owner. And so it wasn't getting built. New housing was not being built. New rental housing was not being built in Faribault because developers couldn't make any money doing it. So as a way, with the public goal of putting new housing in the community, the city had a role to play there in terms of filling that gap. Let's fill that gap between what the rents are and what they need to be to help get the housing built. And so since the city's been active in doing that, as Deanna mentioned, 300 units, these two projects in the pipeline, as well as at least two others that I'm aware of. And so it's started to help overcome that financial gap and has allowed people to make enough money to continue to invest in building housing.
Good, Mr.
Yeah,
Olson?
what kind of risk does the city take on this?
The city does not take a risk. And so these, and Jason can describe, all we do is pay as you go TIF notes, which unlike years in the past, cities used to pay those TIF notes up front. And then you would just rely on the tax, the taxes being paid every year to pay you back, pay the city back. Cities don't do that any longer, and so the developer takes on the risk. The note doesn't get issued until after it's built, and then it's paid with those new taxes to the developer over time. So they have to upfront all those costs. And it's done to reduce the risk on the city, and those developers who ultimately do make money on these projects, that's a risk of being that developer.
Yeah, that's perfect. The only thing I would add is that if you get to the end of that period of time, in this case, let's say you get to the end of 9 years, the note that was issued was agreed to, let's say, $700,000, and the increment that came in over the life wasn't sufficient to make the developer whole. That's 100% developer risk. The city does not make up that shortfall. The district just ends, and the developer doesn't receive its payback in full for the amount that it borrowed up front.
And just the reverse as well. If the district makes $1 million, they still only get the $700,000 that the agreement was entered into to make sure that that project financing was right-sized.
Dr. Robichaud?
Just a question, thank you, Mr. Chair. To drill this down into layperson's term, the negative impact on the district is zero, right, tax-wise?
Correct.
And that's true for 9 years, as long as the TIF contract is open to the developer. So we're not in any way losing taxes. That's the theory that a lot of people have had. If you go into a TIF, they're not going to pay taxes for 10 years, and consequently the district is going to lose out, and that is not the case.
Right, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
Anything else, board members? Board members, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 23-03. There's no further discussion. Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
No.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 5-1.
Thank you. Move on to item 9 now. Consider approval of Resolution 23-04, approving a tax increment financing plan for tax increment financing District Number 18, Faribault Apartments, Willow Street, in Expanded Development District Number 1 in the city of Faribault. So let's do like we did the previous one. Let's have a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Lechtenberg. And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Steves. And discussion. Is there anything else that you need to put forward? Location different, otherwise?
Thank you. Yes. It's exactly the same. Financially does not impact the school district. It's a 9-year district, the same model, the reason that we're before you. The difference is the project and the project locations. This one is TIF number 18, Faribault Apartments, Willow Street Apartments. It's a $31.5 million project, looking at constructing 192 apartment units over multiple phases. It's a 3-phased apartment project. However, the TIF district is still one district with a 9-year limit to it. This district is estimated to collect over the life of the district $2.7 million. The calculations for what would go to the developer, like Jason has said previously, would be less than that. And this is also currently zero, it's owned by the city, so it's a zero tax base, thank you, currently. But again, the project would not have any financial impact on the district.
Thank you. Questions, discussion items, board members? Other call? Ms. Cavalier, any questions, anything?
No thanks, I'm all good.
Okay, seeing or hearing no further discussion, Ms. Steves, will you do a roll call, please?
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
No.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 5-1.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming tonight. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Good luck.
Move on to agenda item number 10, 10A. Consider approval of employment agreement with Jesse Armbruster. So let's have a motion and a second. I'll entertain a motion and a second for the employment agreement with Mr. Jesse Armbruster.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Lechtenberg.
Second.
And a second by Ms. Steves. Discussion, questions, or Mr. Benty, any details you wish to?
I don't see Jesse here. I'm just excited. Jesse has been a member of our middle school team for many years. I don't know the exact number of years. He's looking to take this next step in his career, and we think that he would be a very good fit for our Dean of Students at the middle school.
Good. I could probably add those years in for you because I taught with him 18 years on the middle school, and I've been out 7, so that's 25 with my math, so I think we're pretty good. So just in middle school alone, I know he's at McKinley for a couple of years there as well, so yes. So any further discussion, board members? Mr. Olson?
Yeah. A couple months ago, we denied a leave of absence for an individual for 5 years. And why is this different than that one we denied? Maybe you don't.
So this one is different in the sense that Jesse is looking to move into an administrative role within our district. So we still retain his services in a different role within our district. The one that was denied was an individual that was looking to leave our district. And he had already had, the individual that was denied had already had a 5-year leave previous, and Jesse has not.
And how does that affect the union with bumping? If he's going to reserve a spot as a teacher?
Yes. Yep. He'll reserve his spot as a teacher when he comes back to the classroom.
Can
He will not lose his seniority based on taking this leave.
Can he come back after a year or 2 years, or does he?
He can come back after a year. He has to let us know by February 1st. Is that correct? Of this coming school year. Mm-hmm. So if he decides in January that he doesn't want to be a dean anymore, he lets us know by February 1st his intent to return as a teacher.
But then we got to fill that job that he had. Right?
Yes, correct.
this quite common like this?
I will tell you, I took a leave to come to Faribault High School as the assistant principal 10 years ago, so I would say it's pretty common, yes.
Further discussion, board members? Questions? Further discussion? Questions? Ms. Cavalier, anything?
I just think it's great. I'm glad Jesse's here to take this position for us at this time.
Very good. Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
Congratulations, Mr. Armbruster. Item 10B, consider approval of employment agreement with Dr. Stacy Fox.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Robichaud, and do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Steves. Discussion. So while we're discussing, Dr. Fox, I see you here. I'll ask you to approach. And any questions here? Discussion, Mr. Benty, anything you'd like to add? Or if
No,
you would
Dr.
just-
Fox entered the district at the same time I did, about 10 years ago. She was a teacher at the high school, special ed teacher. Most recently, she was the assistant principal at the high school, and now we are excited to extend her an offer to be our middle school principal.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion?
So this is a permanent,
This is an interim position. Yep, it's an interim position for the middle school principal.
so Dr. Fox will become the middle school principal?
Correct,
Okay, then we have to fill her spot.
correct.
Okay. Losing a good person at the high school.
I am pretty irreplaceable.
Yeah, yeah. I hear that from Mr. Benty all the time, yeah.
Any further discussion or questions? And we're done taking the roll call vote, then I'll ask you to say a few words or whatever. So, Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
Congratulations, Dr. Fox. So if you'd like to say a few words.
I'm just really excited for this opportunity. I love working for the Faribault Public Schools, and there's never been any other school district for me that's really come close to the place in my heart that Faribault has, and I hope that I can continue to do well for the schools and lift the middle school to a place where, you know, we're thriving and we can do great things. So I really appreciate this.
Thank you and congratulations, Dr. Fox. We'll move on to agenda item number 11, the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of the minutes from June 27th, 2022, employment, additional assignments and other, and authorization of payments, transfers, and investments accounts. Could I have entertain a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Lechtenberg, and we have a second. I'll second that. Chair will second. So since there is no discussion on this, Ms. Steve, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to agenda item 12, retirement. Consider approval of retirement of Karen Borridge, 32 years of service. Motion for approval of retirement of Karen Borridge, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Steves. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lechtenberg. And discussion. Well, I'll start off. I'd like to thank Karen for 32 years of service. It's a remarkable amount of time. I was also very fortunate to have both of her daughters in my class at one point, but just a quality person and a quality employee who has made a difference in many, many, many of students' lives here at Faribault Public Schools. So thank you, Karen.
Vice Chair,
Dr.
I
Robichaud.
too would like to extend my appreciation for Karen's dedication to the Faribault Public Schools, and had an opportunity to work with Karen on a number of different assignments and found her a highly competent and dedicated individual. And Again, it's 32 years of experience walking out the door, and you never replace that history, so
That's good.
we wish her well.
Excellent. Ms. Cavalier, anything? I don't mean to keep putting you on the spot, but I don't want to exclude you either.
Well, you know, my kids went to Roosevelt, so I really appreciate
Yes.
everything Karen does for that community, and also just in awe of 32 years of commitment to the district. I think that's fabulous, so congratulations.
Okay, see no further discussion. Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Did it come through? Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 13, finance. We have the minutes from the June 20th, 22 report there, and 13A. And Scott, I think I'm just, or Mr. Gertis, I'm going to ask you just to come on up anyway, and it's always good to summarize or whatever as part of that. So I'm just going to assume with the minutes from the finance committee there that people in their preparation read those minutes and have that. So we'll just move on to 13B. If you just want to take the B1 and 2, the enrollment report, and roll it right into financials, and then we'll do the gifts and donations.
Sounds good. Scott's fine too, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
So just a couple things that I want to present to the board tonight. As you're well aware, the school year successfully ended from a financial standpoint on June 30th. Chris and I and the rest of the accounting team now are working quite hard to try and wrap everything up. Our tentative fieldwork audit, pre-audit, is set to take effect August 10th and 11th, where they start, and from there the full audit is to start the second week in September, so we have a lot to do before then. I did want to point out some good news tonight. So if you look at the enrollment report that is in front of you, so just to bring out a few numbers there's a lot of numbers on that page, but just the ones to highlight. The adopted budget that the board approved back in June of 21 for fiscal year 22 was $3,231. The final budget revision that was approved last month ended the end of the year at $3,263. From an actual standpoint, so we've got our first look at our ADM report for the state of Minnesota. That number is 3,271 and change. So what that means is that based on the first pass of ADM data through the state of Minnesota, we are 8 and change ahead of where we've projected the final budget should be, and almost 41 ADM ahead of where the adopted budget was set last June of 21. So I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions on that.
That's just simply great news.
It is good news. Now, just to realize that could change, but every number that I've seen since has moved it slightly up. So hopefully we're going to be very close and a little bit ahead of the game. So we'll have a positive variance here at the end of the year. So rolling in, the last thing to just talk about briefly, not to sound like a broken record, but if we look at the comparative financial report on the top, you can see that for the most part, all of our utilities are above budget, right? Gas bill is 150-some%. Water bill is just a little bit over 100%, and on and on. The second bit of good news I have to share is in our self-insurance fund. If you look at year-to-date numbers through June to the expenses through June, we're ahead $419,000 in change. So we build up some fund balance in our insurance account for fiscal year 22. Just note that we are going to do some IBNR calculations. So again, acronym, incurred but not received, to account for those services that were provided prior to June 30th that we haven't seen come through the system yet because of the lag in healthcare billing. But that being said, we're looking pretty good in that fund as well. that's all the reports we're planning to share tonight. Everything else is in the middle of being trued up and accounted for and accrued and prepaid and everything else. So if there's any other questions, I would entertain them now.
Mr. Olson?
Yeah, so the graph for enrollment is going up slightly, right?
So the trend data that the board approved 3 months ago now is still going south, okay, based on historical figures. The actual data, right, is what I'm seeing you today is up for fiscal year 22. So when we blend that all in and look at it again next year, that's going to maybe change the trajectory of that line, right? I can't tell you as I sit here today whether it's still going to go south or it's still going to go north or if it's going to be pretty much flat, but we're definitely moving in the right direction.
Excellent. Further questions on these reports? Thank you, Mr. Gertis. Next, let's move on to 13B3, the gifts donations, resolution 23-01, which 23-01 states by approving, we accept the following gifts and donations. One from the Faribault Booster Club of donation of $1,024 for chocolate milk and Uncrustables for summer spec ed and summer strength sessions. So I'll entertain a motion for approval of resolution 23-01.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Robichaud.
Second.
And Ms. Lichtenberg, thank you for the second. Any discussion? I will just say again, Faribault Booster Club, you are shakers and movers out there. The things you do for our district and the community is second to none. So thank you for all of your work and donations here. And I am just amazed at all the good things that happen there. So, anything else? So, Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
Thank you. Move on to 13C. These items were reviewed by the Finance Committee and are suggested for board approval. 13C1, consider approval of fiscal year 23 DHH agreement with Cannon Valley Special Ed Cooperative. I'll entertain a motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lichtenberg. And discussion, or I'll throw it over to Mr. Benty, maybe anything, or is it Mr. Dennert, do you have anything? Is this just a review?
We're selling time to Steph Sec for a deaf and hard of hearing.
It's a yearly review, such as we've done like that. Okay, very good. Are there any other questions or clarifications? Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
So we're just doing 13C1, or are we doing all of them?
I'm just going to do, yes, we'll do them all separate, yes.
Okay. Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
Thank you. 13C2, consider approval of fiscal year 23 Riverbend Nature Center visit and internship annual contracts. Motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Lichtenberg.
Second.
Was that Mr. Olson?
That was me.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you.
We're,
Do you want to thumb more over?
Okay.
we're twins.
You're close over there. Okay, so I'll leave it to Ms. Steves. Discussion. I believe this is, as it says here and in your preparation for the meeting, it's something we do annually with our internship contract with Riverbend. I'm excited to see that that cost did not increase this year from Riverbend, so that's a positive as well. Anything else to add?
Yeah,
Mr.
this is
Benton?
just a wonderful opportunity, continues to be a wonderful opportunity for our students from elementary all the way up through high school. So it's a wonderful place that we have out there in our Riverbend Nature Center, and they have a great education center out there, and the people that work there really work very special with our students when they go out there. So
Exactly.
it's an amazing partnership.
Excellent. Anything further, board members? Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Okay, 13C3, consider approval of building facility assessment agreement. Motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Lechtenberg. And second, Dr. Robichaud, thank you. Discussion. Or Mr. Benti, do I need to refer anything to you on that one?
If you have any questions, I'm going to direct them to Mr. Gertis.
Okay.
So.
Board members, any questions or discussion here? Nope, very well laid out in the packet, I will say that. So, Ms. Steves, seeing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. 13C4, consider approval of annual LTFM, long-term facilities maintenance plan. Motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Steves. And discussion. Questions or discussion? Again, very well laid out in the board packet on board book. Thank you to all who did that. Discussion. Okay, seeing none. Ms. Steves.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 14, no report from the policy committee. Number 15, other matters. 15A, consider approval of resolution 23-02 relating to election of school board members and calling the school district general election. Entertain a motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Steves. Discussion, or Mr. Benti, thank you.
So I would just say that this may look very familiar to you because you just passed this probably right around a month ago. Because we have 4 members that are up for re-election, the only change between the document that you approved at the last meeting and this one is the 4th write-in line. So the law states if you have 4 seats that are open, you have to have 4 write-in lines. So that's the only difference in the 2 documents. So this is just an updated version.
Thank you. Discussion, questions, board members? It's pretty clear. Ms. Steves.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. 15B, 2022 levy presentation.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go. Guess I gotta look this direction. So, all right. So after the last work session, the board had a few questions that they wanted clarity to. So what myself and Mr. Benti went through is put a PowerPoint together, trying to answer some of those questions, review some of the information, because there's a lot of it. And so that's what we're going to try and do here today. The 3 things that we're going to try and do in such order is kind of review our current operating referendum that is up for renewal in fiscal year 25. Okay? The second thing we're going to try and talk about is maybe question 1 is renew the operating referendum, and the third one is question 2, what additional money would look like in conjunction with that. So as we start, just as a reminder, some of the things that we have done here in the past in terms of cutting in the last 6 years And you can see we included on there the fiscal year 23 reductions that the board made last, a couple months ago, for $1 million. The amount that we are projected to take out of fund balance, which is the second to the bottom line of $778,000. And the projected number, looking at fiscal year 24, we're just kind of looking forward into the following year. Okay? Total there equals about 9.5. Okay? So if we look at what this projection looks like, you can see here that this slide, this budget slide will show kind of what happens if our existing operating referendum does not pass either this fall or next fall. Okay, if we don't get renewal. You can see, maybe not, maybe over here, if it works. Anyway, it doesn't look like it's gonna work on the screen. But regardless, you can see in fiscal year 25, you can see we go from $45 million in revenue down to $43 million in revenue. So our operating referendum today roughly nets us $2.1 million, and that's what we would lose if we don't pass this in the next 2 years. And you can see what that does to us is that runs us right up into the ground in fiscal year 25 in the SOD. Okay, those negative numbers. Okay. So, talk about question one, renewing the operating referendum. So, a couple things here that I want to point out on this slide. So, you guys have seen this slide before. I want to just point out that as of Wednesday, roughly middle of last week, Department of Education updated all their inflationary numbers. So these numbers, about the time they went live on Board Book, became obsolete. So if we look at the estimated $632.50 there, that number is now changed with the new inflation to $716.22, I believe is the answer. Okay? And if you look down at the second operating referendum that we passed a couple of years ago, even though we're not talking about that one today, that number went to $256 and change. Okay? Otherwise, everything on here is the dates and everything on here are still accurate. Okay? So I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions on that? Richard?
Go back to slide that the state failed to give us our 2%, right?
So
I know we got 2%, but they failed. They didn't do anything.
Right. So that one slide that was up on the screen is now back again. So we did get 2% in fiscal year 23. So the year that we're in right now, they did give us 2% last year in a kind of a 2-year deal. This assumption assumes for fiscal year 24, 25, 26, and 27, we're going to get 1%. But to your point, as of today, we have no guaranteed increase on the ADM number for fiscal year 24 and beyond. Okay?
Any indication on cross-subsidies increase?
I have nothing, other than our cross-subsidy continues to grow. That's the only thing I can tell you for a positive.
Because our former superintendent basically said here publicly, if they fully fund cross-subsidies, we wouldn't even be talking right now.
Right.
We don't have to, we wouldn't be asking for levies.
And that is accurate, right? With just south of a $6 million special ed cross-subsidy and just south of a $2 million EL cross-subsidy, you're right. We wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. We'd be all home having supper.
Okay.
So, the next slide, I'm just going to grab my computer real quick. So, as we look at the next slide here, so no other questions here. Again, this is just a pictorial of what our operating referendums look like. And again, we've talked about this in the past, the orange is what's disappearing at the end of fiscal year 24. Okay? All right, so operating referendum. So you guys have seen this slide as well, but just a couple things to point out on here. Operating referendum only can be done once a year, right? It has to be done in November, right? So we only have 2 chances to renew our existing operating referendum, November of '22 and November of '23. Okay? All right? So again, if we renew it at the end of, in the fall of '22, the money will start payable '24 for fiscal year '25. Okay? So we have existing authority for our referendum through fiscal year '24. The renewal will take effect in '25. I know that's very confusing, but I just make sure everybody's clear on that, right? Okay? All right? So if we look at this number, this assumes, again, that our operating referendum is renewed and that we're kind of back on track. Again, not out of the woods by any means, but we're back on track, not losing that $2.1 million in revenue in fiscal year '25. Okay? But again, still pushing SOD regardless in fiscal year '25. Okay? And again, as was mentioned earlier, you can see where Faribault sits here. And again, you guys have seen this iteration of this chart as well. But Faribault sits at the bottom of our counterparts in the Big Nine, and even below state averages if you look at all of the state averages across Minnesota.
Excuse me, Mr. Vice Chair, could you just clarify for the audience what SOD is?
SOD is statutory operating debt.
And how is that determined?
When your fund balance, so when this number here at the bottom is below 2.5%. At that point in time, the state will come in and run the district for us, and Mr. Benty and I will go somewhere else.
And not with bars on it either, no?
What was that?
Not a place with bars on it either.
Bars. Okay, so this is a slide that Mr. Benty put together at the end of our last little meeting with our referendum committee, and just, you know, this really is all encompassing, right? If you look at everything on that slide, I mean, that touches every aspect of this school district, right? So I'm not gonna belabor talking about this one, but you can see nothing would be off the table at this point in time. So now we're gonna talk about question number 2, right? Or what that might look like. And so, again, there's an option that we can do an additional operating referendum, and we'll talk about those in the near future here. But the other option that's on the table is a capital project or a tech levy for the district. Couple things that are different here. A tech levy is based on net tax capacity. And so the amount of money that we ask for gets spread differently than that of an operating referendum, which is based on another acronym there, R&B, referendum market value. Okay? And I'll show these differences here in dollars here in just a second. Okay? Again, the state does not give us any aid on a tech levy. Also, the ag part of a tech levy does not receive the ag credit because it is not a bond. It is that of a levy. Okay, a couple differences there just to make note. Okay? All right, and again, we can do this multiple times throughout the year. Not that we would do that, but that is obviously an option going forward. Okay. All right, so this slide, again, lots of numbers on this slide. I really want you to focus on the 2 dark blue numbers, right? So at the last work session, the board talked about using that $90 per year for the average household. That is reflected in the yellow line on this chart, okay? At $90, and you can see that's at $90. For reference, the green line below it is all of Rice County and what that would look like at a Rice County level. That's just on there for reference only. But as you can see, when you get up to how much money that each of these items bring, the referendum at the top drives in about 900 and some thousand dollars. And a tech levy will drive in about 1.38 million, or about a $400,000 difference. And the reason for that is if you look down below on how they're affected, you will see in the ag section of the operating referendum, there's all zeros. Again, because ag land is not taxed for an operating referendum. The additional revenue comes in with the tech levy is based on a taxable amount for both homesteaded and non-homesteaded land. Now, that amount, if you look at, $9,000 per acre of homesteaded land at $1.70, a person farms 10,000 acres, which, is quite a bit, I think, for an average farmer nowadays, maybe not. We're looking at $17,000 to a farmer who's farming 10,000 acres, assuming they're all worth $9,000 an acre, right? So I'm going to stop here because I've talked a lot. Any questions that the board might have here on this? Again, a lot of numbers up on that screen.
So, with the, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Olson.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you do, on the first question, well, there's another name for inflation rate. Consumer price index or what? What is that called?
So the inflation rate that the Department of Ed works at, they call it a lot of things, is based on the Irwin index of the CPI. So it's just an index that they use, and that is actually based on the United States Bureau of Statistics that calculates that. So that went from 0.2 to 7.17.
Wow.
For fiscal year 22.
So in 1 year?
In 1 year, yes.
Do we put a limit on that?
No.
You can't, right? Like, inflation 9.1, wages are going up 5. You're already losing money, right?
Yep.
On the individual, normal?
Well,
nationwide?
remember that the 7.17% is not a direct inflation to the consumer at the end, right? The 7.17 is just a percentage increase on the per pupil amount of our levy. And then that's calculated through a bunch of calculations by the county to the tax base. And so the actual increase to the taxpayers might not be 7.17. That'll be some other number yet to be determined by the county.
So any guesstimate of what it,
I have no idea. And I wouldn't even want to take a guess at that, Mr. Olson, because that's a pretty complex calculation that has hundreds and hundreds of
but it will
different
go up?
variables. But it will go up.
Oh, it'll go
Absolutely.
up.
Absolutely correct. That's,
I mean, larger than the year before?
yes. Yes. Now, it is possible, right, that they adjust these again, and again, they can do them up to quarterly, right? I think I mentioned that at a previous board meeting. I was just waiting for it to happen, and at the end of last week, or middle of last week, it happened. So
if the inflation rate goes up to 10, 12%, that goes up?
Yes.
Relationship, right?
Yep, it's a relationship. It's not the inflation rates that you hear about on the news or whatever.
But there's a correlation.
But there absolutely is a correlation to that, yes.
But the people be paying more taxes just on renewing the levy, right?
Yes. That is true. But again, it's not a lot. That difference roughly won't even net the district $250,000, right, per year. So you spread $250,000 over the entire tax base, might be a couple dollars a year, right?
Any further questions on the levy presentation?
So on slide 6, this sounds really dumb, but can you paint kind of a picture in my head about, I see these numbers, and what does that mean in terms of teaching staff? What does that mean for number of kids in classrooms?
So I'll start with saying I am the worst artist you've ever met, so if you hired me to be an artist, I might as well resign right now, right? But if we're looking at a negative number, and I'm not sure which graph you are looking at because I wasn't even quite done with the presentation, so which slide are you on?
Slide 6 assumes that the operating
Okay.
referendum is not renewed.
Right. So let's just talk about if the existing operating referendum isn't renewed, we lose about $2.1 million. If you equate that to teachers, that's roughly 30 teachers, right? If we use $70,000 times 30, that's 2.1 million. Okay. If you spread those out, Nicole might have to help me here. I'm guessing that's going to put 1 to 2 more kids on average per classroom, at least. Okay? And that would be, across all the schools, not just the elementary, right? There could be, we have that slide in there that talks about all the other things that could be touched. I might let Mr. Benty chime in on a few of those things. But it could be part of athletics, it could be part of the arts, it could be part of electives, it could be part of...
It would be hard to say because if we're in that situation, basically everything is on the table. So you would sit down and cabinet and the leadership team would sit down and we would look at it and we would say, how do we get to this number? And we would honestly look at every single program and position that we have.
Vice Chair, Scott, a couple of questions. When you talk about that $2 million we would lose from the levy, that's projecting in 2004, right? So basically, we would actually having to reduce more than the lost revenue because we would also possibly have some reduction in students and other kinds of factors that might play out in that. So the actual budget reduction may be closer to $2.5 million.
That's exactly right, Dr. Robichaud. The 2.1 million would simply be related to the loss of the existing operating referendum that we have today. And then, it would be way more than 2.1, it would be over $3 million.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Olson?
Mr. Chair, so you said teachers, but let's not focus on teachers. It could be paraprofessionals, it could be coordinators or directors, right? Anything's on the table, right? You said,
Yep, administration, paraprofessionals, EAs,
okay, so when you say
teachers.
teachers, I hate to, 30 teachers, or it could not, maybe whatever.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
could be, I don't want to pick on the teachers because why should they get the brunt of any cuts all the time? So it could be everything, right?
I think that's what Mr. Benty said.
Yeah.
Everything would be on the table.
Yeah.
So, just to clarify, that even if it is renewed, we will still be making cuts in 6 months' time.
If the operating referendum is renewed with no additional dollars for fiscal year '24, we will be up again against about a $1.9 million budget deficit for fiscal year '24.
Are we allowed to jump between renewal and?
I was just going to say, well, let's wrapping this up, but I think we have some options that are going to be presented to us here, and maybe this is a good time to lead into that.
If I could get the one last slide
Certainly.
of the presentation from the powers to be in the back room. So there's one more slide I just want to point out. So this was just an example that I wanted to just talk about real quick. This funding model that you see in front of you here on slide 17 assumes a tech levy, right? That was just the example that I did. For the $1.38 million that we talked about earlier off that slide is passed this fall. We would then get those dollars in fiscal year 24, and you can see what it would do to the model going forward, right? So we would have a lot more revenue in fiscal year 24. Again, expenses always continue to go up, right? But our deficit at the end of fiscal year 24 is only $750,000, and we'd still have a fund balance roughly of 8.5%. You go out to fiscal year 25, again, and it looks a little bit better, right? With only $2 million in loss, but we still have a fund balance of almost 5%. Where we fall short is we kick the can down the road to fiscal year 26, where everything kind of goes below zero.
Mr. Chair, on the tech levy, so what can that be used for? I'm just trying to, if there's some creative financing, is that, are we pulling money or saving money from the general operating? That basically was that we're funding this for technology, right?
That is
So we don't
correct.
have to take it out of our general, right?
You got it, Mr. Olson,
Okay.
that's exactly right, that we would take money, tech expenses, right? So anything from technology staff to software to hardware to the printers and copiers to all of the networking expenses, security, so on and so forth, and take it out of the general fund, put it in its own little pool, right? Still inside the general fund, but its own little bucket, and then free up those dollars in the general fund for other expenses.
Do we have a current,
You go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Olson, certainly.
do we have a current tech levy right now?
No, we do not. The only two debt instruments that we have today besides building debt is our two operating referendum that we talked about earlier. One that's renewing here in a couple of years, and another one that's
So
down
the
the road.
tech levy is, if we say that, that's pretty specific
Yes,
for what you mentioned, the iPads and our
Yep.
Technology staff,
yes. Yep,
and we can't cross that money. We can't,
correct,
we can't,
correct. We can't
Can't.
even take a, indirect costs or overhead costs. We can't even do that with a tech levy. It's gotta be direct expense, not indirect.
Go ahead, Mr. Olson.
okay, thank you. If there was one question, but then tack on this tech, then you have to change that statement.
I think if you hold off a little bit, we're gonna talk about those options.
Oh, the options.
Those are
Here, I
three
think,
options
is
we're coming up on.
coming
Okay,
right
okay.
behind
Great
us.
questions, great clarification, though. That was good. So I think, anything else on the levy presentation? So
Can I
in-
chime in?
Oh, go ahead, Courtney.
Scott, I'm not sure if I heard correctly, but could you just talk me through the sample slide you just showed? And, because it looks like we're in pretty quickly still moving into deficit spending 25, 26, 26, 27, and out of fund balance.
So Courtney, that is correct. Think of it this way. If every year, because expenses go up and we lose a few students, right? So revenue goes down, that's a compounding effect, right? So just assume we lose $2 million a year through that. That's just an assumption, that's just a wild number. We're adding in $1.38 million into the budget. So every year we lose 1.9 for 5 years, but we add in 1.38 as a one-time revenue stream. You can see that the end result is still not good. It does push the can down the road another year, maybe a year and a half, but the end result is in fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27, again, without any budget reductions, right? This model shows is 0 budget reductions and just a 3% across the board, right, for simplicity, we are gonna be 10% in the hole in 5 years, right? Which we won't be, because the state will come down here first and stop it.
But we'll still be doing right-sizing budget cuts each year.
Yes.
Moving forward. Can you just clarify what you said about the tech levy being a one-time?
So the tech levy is just a one-time influx of revenue. And by that, I mean, we get 1.38 million in this example, 24, we get 1.38 in 25, 26, 27, 28, and so on and so forth, for up to 10 years, if that's the way the board chooses. While expenses keep going up, assuming the state does nothing, our revenue stays flat at some point in time, and you get this gap, right? Like you've seen in these charts that we talk about at the levy, you know, the levy meetings in the fall, you know, revenue doesn't keep up with inflation, right? And that's what we would still have, is that gap widening over time.
So, Mr. Gertis, so what you're saying is the tech levy does not have an inflationary number built into it. It's what, that 1.3 some million consistent year to year?
That is not exactly accurate, Mr. Bellingham. There is a inflationary mechanism to a tech levy. It's a percentage of the increase of the net tax capacity year over year of the district property,
Okay.
right? But that a little bit of added revenue does not keep up with the 3% inflation on $50 million, right?
Okay, thank you.
So, but that's a good question.
Okay.
You asked the question, Mr. Vice Chair. I do have one more. And that is the tech levy is not, it can be for 10 years, right? There's no
Yes, 10
restriction.
years is the maximum, right? The difference with a tech levy is that you can start to renew your tech levy 5 years in advance instead of 2 years in advance like you can on an operating referendum. That is a difference.
I also have just one
Ms. Lichtenberg, go ahead.
point of clarification. So the tech levy would be when you explained that the farmland would be taxed, that would be through the tax levy, whereas the operating cost would just be the residential homes and the farm site?
Yes, that is correct, for an operating referendum.
And the businesses.
And the
And
businesses. And the
Yeah,
commercial.
commercial as well.
So let's take a look at 15 C, D, and E. And Mr. Venti, I'm going to ask you to help me
Yeah,
go
so
through this.
this is going to be a little bit confusing here. So you're going to see 3 different resolutions. We can only pass one of them. All right, because the other ones will negate. So if you pass the first one, because you say, yes, we want to renew, and then you go and don't pass the second one, it will negate the first one. So you're going to see 3 resolutions, and it's kind of C3, pick one. Okay, so I think, you know, I don't know how Robert's Rules of Order says to do this, but I think we should present all 3, and then you can decide which one somebody wants to make a motion on.
I was going to just, that's great. I was just going to go over these once again as how I have it in my mind and what I've reviewed. So 15C is renewing the current levy that we have in for 10 years. No, it's either this year or next year, and there's no new income, no new raise in taxes. It's the same income we have coming in, correct?
Other than the inflationary difference year over year, which is, we talked about earlier, went from 2.3 to 7.1.
Got it. 15D, which is Resolution 2305, is renewing that levy and asking for a dollar amount, I'm going to say $90. Is that correct? An additional $90. Go ahead, Mr. Gertis.
So, a couple things with the second proposal. Keep in mind that the $90 is based on the taxes to the individual average home. The revenue that is raised by that $90 to the average home will generate, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's $302.
302 even.
Yep, $302 per pupil unit per year. Again, with an inflationary rider, so that number will continue to grow. The way this resolution is written, I just want to clarify, is that, as Mr. Benty stated earlier, these two questions are tied together in this option, right? Because of this, of the couple reasons. One, if we were to decide to do an operating referendum that came due in fiscal year '24, and then we have one that comes due in fiscal year '25, and then we have another one that comes due in fiscal year '30, we would end up with 3 different operating referendums, all with different termination years, and managing that would be rather difficult, right, into the future. Okay? The reason another reason why the two questions are tied together is if you had separate questions, that allows the individual voter at the end of the day to choose one or the other. And what would most people do? Spend $700 or spend $300, right? So chances are we won't get the renewal, we'll only get the second question instead of tying it back to the first. And the third thing is, again, both of those questions are for fiscal year '25, the starting fiscal year '25. So that option would force a reduction of expenses for fiscal year '24, right, to that tune of, $1.92 million.
Which is what we're doing, we will be doing next spring.
Yeah.
This board, regardless of passage or not, correct?
Well, if you were, yes, right, based on, again, this option only.
Yes, okay,
Yes,
thank you.
that is accurate.
Yeah,
And
so
this
the
is
way
two
that,
questions.
go
Two
ahead.
questions, right? The renewal and the $90.
Yep, so the way that this resolution is written is that the first question is still the renewal. All right, the second question is the above and beyond. And that, the second question can only pass if the first question passes. But like Mr. Gertis said, the money is delayed 1 year to the end of the first question, which means that we run about a $1.9 million shortfall. I asked him today, can our fund balance cover that? And the answer was no. It can cover roughly half, you said.
It's actually a little bit less than that, it's about 38%.
Okay, so the board would have to decide, does it want to lower its general fund percentage for 1 year? Or do you want to make cuts, even if both of these pass, if you want to make cuts and then turn around and make adds the following year?
Okay, so then I'll move on to resolution 23-07, which is renew the levy and do the technology levy of additional income of 1.3 some million dollars, correct?
That is correct, and if you don't mind,
Go ahead.
just to share just a few caveats with that. Again, that one's a little different because you have an operating referendum as question 1, and we have a tech levy as question 2. So those two are not tied together because it doesn't make sense to tie two different mechanisms together. So the tech levy is more similar to that last slide that I showed you here at the end, where the tech levy revenue will happen in fiscal year '24. So it would help alleviate the $1.9 million that Mr. Benty just mentioned. And then the renewal will happen in the course of time for fiscal year '25. So that's the way that model is kind of structured today that you saw on the slide here right at the end.
Right. So, Mr. Olson, go ahead. Mr. Olson.
Okay. So, I'll call it option D, is very dangerous.
Which one are you referring to, option D? I'm sorry.
Yeah, D, I think you're tying them both together, right?
No,
I don't have the.
so
agenda.
you're talking
So
about,
that's item
you're talking about the renewal, you're talking about the renewal and the new referendum,
$90,
correct?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So
So
those
that's
are,
option, yeah, I would call that option 2, but
oh, okay, option 2, okay, sorry. Okay, option, but that, okay, let's go back. Option 1, on the ballot, what will that say?
So in that resolution, Mr. Olson, a copy in the resolution, a copy of the ballot question is in the resolution. So if you want to read that, and it would say exact verbiage as it is, I can pull that up here.
It's listed in the board pack is what
Yeah,
he's saying.
right, I can't, for some reason, I can't call it up here. But I looked at it, but I want
Yeah,
to
and
clarify.
and the resolutions that you see in the board packet will be the exact language that goes onto the ballot. So these have gone through our attorneys, had they been vetted by Ehlers, and as long as you approve the money amounts, the same money amounts, that language will be exactly what is seen on the ballot.
Mr. Olson, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're asking is, at the bottom of the ballot, under yes and no, it does say, by voting yes on this ballot question, you are voting to extend an existing property tax referendum that is scheduled to expire. That's what, it doesn't say no tax increase, that, they can't say that, but that's what it says on that. Is that kind of what you were looking?
Yeah, that's what, and
Okay.
then option 2, where they're tied together, there would be a tax increase.
Yes, so option 2, and
There would only be a tax increase if both were passed.
so there is 2 separate questions. The first question is identical to what Mr.
Yeah,
Dunn-
explain that again on number 2. One kicks out another. Explain that again. And on option 2.
Yep, so option 2 has the renewal question, similar to what Mr. Bellingham just read, right? That's question 1, with that favorable language, right? And then option 2 says, and I will actually read this out loud for you. The Board of Independent School District 656 Faribault has proposed to increase its general education revenue by $302 per pupil if ballot question number 1 is approved, subject to an annual increase for the rate of inflation, which we've already talked about. The proposed referendum revenue authorization will be first levied in 2023 for taxes payable in 2024. And for us here in school finance, that means fiscal year 25, right? So you just run them up in order, right? Levy 23, payable 24, and school revenue in 25. And applicable for 10 years unless otherwise revoked or reduced as provided by law. And then at the bottom, if you can see that, it says, by voting yes to this ballot question, you are voting for a property tax increase.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
So these are tied together, you said. If one fails, all fails?
That's my understanding.
If one fails, second one becomes null and void.
I'm wrong.
One can pass and 2 can fail. That would be a viable option.
Okay. So they're
It's
not,
not-
they're
not
not tied
both
together.
directions.
They're not really tied together.
They're on the same, yeah. One can pass, 2 can fail, but if one fails, 2 cannot pass.
So let's just say hypothetically, Mr. Olson, everybody votes for the 302% increase, or excuse me, $302 per pupil, and nobody votes for the $700. We don't get the $700, and we don't get the $302 either.
So option 2 is very dangerous.
I don't see it that way. I think it's
I don't either.
I think it's a safer one. You have question 1 saying, continue the existing levy, no tax increase. We're asking, the second question is, we're asking for a $90 increase, or a $302, should I say $302?
$302 per pupil.
Per pupil unit, and that will increase your taxes. Those 2, so if one passes, 2 can either pass or fail.
And
Can
just
they
to-
be combined into one question?
They
I
can
would
be,
hesitate
but then
to
we
do that.
lose our favorable language on the first question.
Yes.
Oh,
And then I think, Mr. Olson, it becomes a little bit more dangerous at that point in
that's,
time.
yeah, that's dangerous.
And just to clarify, that $302 increase equates to roughly the $90 on the average home in Faribault. Right? So you gotta kind of keep those two numbers separate in your head. It's not $90 per pupil unit. It's a $90 increase to the average household of $250-some thousand, which will generate big picture $302 per pupil unit for the entire district, which will be about $900,000.
So the option 2, there's no mention of tech. That's in option 3.
That's correct, yes. So option 3, I'll get you in a minute, Mr. Rocha. Option 3 is the
Well, thoroughly confused.
continuation of the levy, and then the proposed tech levy of 1.3 million, which is that. So, Dr. Robichaud, thank you for your patience.
Vice Chair, question on that, question 1 and 2. Question 1 has to pass in order for question 2 to be.
Under option number 2,
Yeah.
that is correct.
Yeah, so if question 1 passes, they go to question 2. If it doesn't pass, it's null and void. But question 1 still passes if the majority of the people voting vote yes.
That eliminates the scenario 1 that Mrs. Steves asked about earlier that we talked about in the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, Ms. Cavalier, any questions?
I'd just like to hear about the tech levy option.
You would like to hear
The next resolution.
option 3?
Yep.
Okay. So
I assume that's where we're going anyway.
that's the next one. It's continuing. Mr. Curtis, correct me, Mr. Benty, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's continuation of the existing levy and now adding a tech levy, which would bring in 1.3 million per year.
And this time, the second ballot question doesn't depend on the passing of the first ballot question.
That is correct.
So
These are not tied together or contingent in any way, shape, or form.
So the first question can pass, the second one not, or the second one can pass and the first one not, correct?
Correct.
Flexible either way. So it's really option 2 and 3, kind of the, no, I'll take that. Not the same. Question 2 is different, right, than question 3?
Yes, because again, remember, it's two separate funding mechanisms.
Right.
One is an operating referendum based on referendum market value. Second question is the project levy / tech levy based on net tax capacity of the district.
And the net, and option 3 with the tech levy taxes farmland different, other than just the building site in 1 acre, it taxes all the agricultural land. That's why the difference of $400,000 per year of that, okay? So that's how those two differentiate, where the $90 one does not, it's just the building site in 1 acre.
And again, just to refresh, these are on different years as well.
Okay.
The way this option is written, it brings us in the tech levy dollars in fiscal year '24 for next school year, and then renews the existing operating referendum in '25.
So we don't have that year where we have to make that 1 year cut.
Or as much of it.
As much of, yes, as that full amount cut. So,
Can I chime in again, Mr. Vice Chair?
Certainly.
Can I infer from what you both said, Mr. Benty, Mr. Gertis, that if you had to make a recommendation to us, you'd be recommending the third ballot combination? Is it too premature for me to ask this question?
well, I think the options are out there for the board. The option number 3 is very palatable because it brings in the most amount of revenue for the district. But even with that revenue in option 3, we are still reducing. So I want to be very clear about that. Option 1, just renewal, we're reducing. Option 2, renewal and operating levy, we're reducing. Option 3, renewal and project levy, project levy, we are still cutting our budget. So none of these 3 options stop us from reducing our budget.
Mr. Chair, okay, I was gonna ask the question, what would it take where we don't have to use the word cut?
It would, and I'm shooting from the hip here, so.
It's like reverse math.
It would basically take looking at this, it would take a third question, and it would take that question at probably about another $90
That's real close.
rate to go through.
Can we increase the tech levy or not?
Yep,
But then you can't use it for but that takes it out of the general fund, but.
so a couple things with that. Yes, we can increase the tech levy. There is no limit on a tech levy. What the limit is how much money we spend as a district in qualified tech levy expenses, which is about $2 million, right? So we could increase up to roughly $2 million for that tech levy. if
So
we
like
wanted
an
to.
example, which is silly, like, why don't we make it 5 million? Then we use it for, we can't do that.
No,
Okay.
no, not unless you give Mr. Rutherford a big raise.
Mr. Gertis, if I could ask you on option 3 here with the tech levy, that's what I wish to call it. What is the dollar amount in tax increase on the average home, 250,000? I should know that, but I don't.
No, again, it's consistent. It's, again, this tech levy question is still based on $90 for the average home in school district boundaries.
So the only difference of income coming in is agricultural land or non-agricultural land?
And a little bit higher rate on the commercial.
On the commercial business, thank you.
Yep, and again, both homesteaded and non-homesteaded.
Okay, thank you.
Right, those are 2 separate kind of
Okay.
categories, right? We want to make sure we include
I have that now, thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chair, so our survey told us that the Faribault residents were more inclined to vote for a $90 increase to keep us going forward. So this gives them the chance to fulfill that, plus maybe a little bit more. But for those that put all their eggs in that survey, we at least are offering them what the survey said Faribault Public would pass.
That's correct. So we need to decide here is if we wish to do, let's just call them option 1, 2, or 3, or option 15C, 15D, or 15E, or change any thereof. Dr. Robichaud.
Mr. Vice Chair, just for clarification, we did have a presentation tonight talk about a third question. Can you clarify that we cannot act on that because it was not on the agenda? It was not approved?
Mr. Curtis. Thank you.
If the board chooses to go with, I'm going to say option 4, 5, or 6.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Then what that would take is for Mr. Benty and I to redraft a new resolution to align with the board's wishes, and probably would require a special meeting, or is that what's called, an extra meeting, or whatever, to act on that, because those resolutions, one, would have to again be vetted by our election attorney, and then past Ehlers as well for accuracy before the board, before we want the board to make any motions on any of that.
Thank you.
But that it is an option.
Okay.
Right?
Ms. Steves.
So I know we're kicking this down the road a little bit and it's cutting it really, really close. I would like to explore Mr. Robichaud's option, opinion, whatever, of the third question. If possible, do I need to make a motion or?
Could I clarify that, Dr. Robichaud? Did you make a suggestion of maybe we need to look at a third question as well?
Yes, as long as it's not on the agenda tonight, we can't act on it, I would assume, because that's already been approved. But if there's a way for us to explore that, I would certainly, heard some very strong positive reaction to moving that forward. So if that's possible, Mr. Vice Chair, I'd
Okay.
like to.
Well, we can add an agenda item, but I would need, if that's the direction the board wants to go for the third, fourth, or fifth option, or whatever we have here, I would suggest then maybe we table the resolutions here to our August 8th, we call a special board meeting for August 8th, and have that information drawn up so we can then have it beforehand and present and have all those as well. That would be my thought right now as I'm listening here.
And then just to clarify, August 8th at our special board meeting, that would be the date that we have to make a decision.
That's correct. That's crunch time, correct? We're right down to the,
Probably a little bit past that, but we can make that work.
okay, thank you. So if you wish to do that, we can entertain a motion to table 15 C, D, and E with recommendation to have an additional question on the ballot to the August 8th special meeting that we'll have. Yes, the August 8th special meeting that we'll have. And that special meeting then would have just that agenda item on it as of right now. Did I do that correct?
Yes, what I was trying to communicate to Mr. Benty, who can't obviously read lips, is I would like if the board could structure what they think that third question and or the second question. Or
Yeah, I was going to ask
the
that.
whole thing
yes.
looks like, so that we have the right, since we're kind of at the end, right?
Okay.
We have the right document drafted for you and vetted completely before August 8th.
Okay, so board members, let's tackle that issue right now then. And if we're going to do that, let's talk about an additional, or let's say option 4 with an additional third question. So Dr. Robichaud or Ms. Steves, or anyone else have any thoughts on this? Ms. Cavalier, I am not sure.
Mr. Vice Chair, may not be necessary, well, unless we want to go for a tech levy as well, wouldn't be necessary to have 3 questions. We could go with 2 questions with that second question increasing the amount we're asking for to accommodate that additional $90 per pupil unit. If we want to go for a tech levy, we would have to have 3 questions, I'm envisioning. But if we didn't have the tech levy and there the capital improvement levy, then we could just do the 2 questions with the second question asking for what we have originally on this ballot and add $90 more per pupil unit to that. Am I making any sense? Or?
Yeah, you are, but my concern with that is that with the graph that Baker Tilly showed us, the community, from the survey, the community would be very unlikely to entertain something like that at the 180. You're talking about asking for $180 per pupil unit more, correct?
Mr. Benty, $180 for the average.
Excuse me,
household,
average household, yes.
Which would net roughly $600 in additional revenue per pupil unit.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I rest.
So thoughts now with that? Or are we back to option 2 then of staying with that $90 from what I'm hearing with that, or do you wish to table?
I wish to table 15C, D, and E until we hear about a 4th option. So the 4th option being a renewal, the $90, and a potential $90 on a third question.
$90 referendum or $90 tech levy?
Referendum. Is it difficult to do either or, I mean?
No, I just would want to entertain a little bit more of what you're thinking, Mr. Steve. So are you thinking about renewal, part 1, question 1, $302 per pupil unit or $90 for the average household, question 2, and then either another $90 is question 3, or the tech levy that we have in option 3 today as question 3 in this new proposal.
Correct. So if we could do, can you do both, where question 3 is the revenue generated on an operating, and question 3 is the revenue generated on a tech? Still with the first two questions, knowing that if B doesn't pass, then C doesn't pass. If A doesn't pass, B doesn't pass. But the tech levy could pass differently. Am I making sense?
Yes, no, I'm following exactly what you're saying, Mrs. Steve. Just, a couple things that come to mind. One of the things that if Jeff were sitting beside me here today, he would say, we want to keep this simple, right? So that people understand, as he put it to me the other day, last week, a confused voter is a no voter. So sometimes a 3-question ballot can do that to an individual, right? They stand here and it's like, what the hell does this all mean, right? And so it's hard for the average person who knows nothing about school finance to sit and pick through that. We can put those questions together, no matter what, however you want to do it. We wouldn't make question 3 contingent upon question 2 with the tech levy, right? Because again, you have 2 different funding mechanisms there. So we can put that all together if the board wants to look at those options. But just so you are aware, the numbers aren't going to change, right? Depending on how you design the question, right? So it's only going to be kind of what the board wishes to do in terms of laying them out, and raising dollars, right? Because a tech levy is still going to raise $1.3 million, whether you put it in slot 2 or slot 3, right? And
Okay.
we already know what a $90 is going to do, right? So, does that make sense? What I'm trying to ask is that the end result is going to be the same in terms of dollars raised per question.
Okay. I guess I would feel more comfortable, thinking about it a little bit and tabling this until the 8th. So do I?
Okay, so let's go back to square one here. So again, you wish to move to table 15C, D, and E, and also add and ask Mr. Gertis and Mr. Benty to add, you want to add that now?
The fourth option of a third question for an operating referendum.
So, just so I'm clear, option 4 will be a renewal, part 1. $302 per pupil unit, contingent about 1 passing to question 1. And question 3 is going to be another $302 per pupil unit, contingent upon number 2 passing downstream. Is that?
Explain that again. Explain.
These are tied together. I thought maybe it was separate.
If you have 2 questions that are alike, it wouldn't really matter how you do it, right? Because the end result could be the
I
same.
thought that now with maybe a third question that each stand alone.
Again, that gives people, Mr. Olson, the opportunity to say bid for vote for part 2 and part 3, and vote no for part 1, and then we'd be going backward, right? Because part 1 is $716 per pupil unit, and part 2 and 3 would only be $604 per pupil unit, so they could vote for questions 2 and 3, leave 1 alone, and we'd be going backward in that whole picture, right?
So option 4, which is proposed in the motion to table here, option 4 would be just 3 things, because I think the numbers are getting us confused here, right? Or at least me anyway. So 1 would be the continuation of the existing levy we have now, the $302, correct?
No.
The second,
$716.22.
right, okay. The second question would be approval of a $90 increase in taxes for however, 300 and some, $302 there. And the third question on option 4 would be an additional $90 to, so we don't have to reduce programs or whatever, that option. Am I correct in that?
Exactly.
Okay.
Are
I got
either
that.
one of those a tech, or are both of those
Both operating.
both operating?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so
Can I chime in?
Go ahead, Ms. Cavalier.
I think, don't we need the tech levy option so that we have funding coming in and we don't have a gap year where we have to do the cuts, regardless of whether we add an additional question? I think we need that money for 2024.
Mr. Gertis.
Ms. Cavalier is correct in that assumption, is that, again, these three questions would drive additional revenue for fiscal year '25, would leave fiscal year '24 with a hole, right? So, and then for clarity on your option 4, question 3 contingent upon question 2, question 2 contingent on question 1.
Right. So all we're doing is tabling this so we get information and being able to analyze until August 8th, and then that will be, obviously we'll act on one of those 4 options that you present to us, correct? That's all we're doing.
Mrs. Steves maybe talked about option 5,
So then,
right, by putting the tech levy into this mix as well.
so then option 5, potentially, I mean, I apologize for confusing this. So it would be the operating renewal, a tech levy, and then an operating renewal at $90, right? Or not renewal, operating referendum at $90,
In that order.
right?
Yes, I agree, Cassie. I think you got it right.
So option 5 sounds good. Okay.
I think option 5 might be a little bit confusing for the general public, right? Because now you're gonna tie the third part of the question back to the first part of the question, and then the second part of the question is gonna stand by itself because it's a tech levy. So would we be better off if you wanna go with that to have the renewal, additional operating referendum, and a tech levy as the third part? I'm just throwing that out there. I think that's still a confusing scenario for the general public, but putting the operating referendums together would be less confusing, I think.
I agree with that.
Welcome your thoughts there, or anybody's.
Yeah, I think keeping the referendum together makes sense, because you can make them contingent on each other, like we had in one of our other options. And then move that tech levy down to the third space, which is then the additional money.
Okay.
So you've made that motion to table?
Yes, I did. Do you want me to make it again?
Ms. Yocum, you got that all down? But, so Mr. Benty, Mr. Gertis, Ms. Yocum, and Ms. Steves, you have the motion to table with what's going to come up on August 8th, correct? Do you have everything you need with that?
Did you want us to switch those, or did you want us to leave them the way that you said them?
I would prefer you to leave it how I asked.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Gertis.
Which is the renewal, tech levy, and additional operating?
Would be option 5, and option 4 would be all operating referendums.
I've got it written down. Option 4 is renewal, then additional referendum.
Yep, what's
Option 5 is renewal, then tech levy, then optional referendum.
Okay, that again, that scenario, I think in a ballot question will be very, very, very confusing to the general public.
Okay.
We can look at that and analyze that on August 8th.
Do you want us to bring in option 6, which is just those flip-flopped? So, because we won't be able to add it on the night of the 8th.
Yes, I'd like that.
Yeah.
So we have that. So that's in the, you want to add that to your motion to table and instructions as well? Add option 6 as well?
Add options 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, so Mr. Benty, Mr. Gertis, Ms. Yocum, you have that all down. So we have the motion to table. I'm trying to move this along if you can see here. Correct? You're good?
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Robichaud. And discussion. I think we've
Discussed it today.
discussion.
Okay, so basically on August 8th, we will have all of our options in front of us, and we have to decide on August 8th, right? We can't do tabling these
Correct.
options on August 8th.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And these will remain the same, the 3 options that we have.
We will bring you options 1 through 6.
Okay. Any further discussion? Ms. Steves, roll call on the motion to table.
Courtney Cavalier.
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg.
Aye.
Richard Olson.
No.
Jerry Robichaud.
Aye.
Cassie Steves. Aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 5 to 1.
Thank you. Ms. Gertis, thank you so much for all this and your work, and Mr. Benty as well. So we'll move on to agenda item number 15F, consider approval of superintendent evaluation summary 2021-22 for Todd Sesker. I will
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of the superintendent evaluation summary. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lechtenberg. So, with that for discussion, I am to read the evaluation as put forward by Chair Wolf. July 21st, 2022, the Faribault School Board met in a closed session on June 27th, 2022 for the purpose of evaluating the superintendent of schools, Mr. Todd Sesker. This was Mr. Sesker's final evaluation as he is retiring as superintendent. Attendees included Mr. Sesker, Nicole Yocum, Faribault Public Schools Human Resources, Chad Wolf, Cassie Steves, Richard Olson, Jerry Robichaud, Courtney Cavalier, John Bellingham, and Leanne Lechtenberg. Performance goals that were established for Mr. Sesker for school year 2021-22 were: school improvement, develops and articulates a clear vision for a differentiated elementary school programs throughout the Faribault Public School District and assures innovative, engaging, and student-centered instruction and enhances learning for Faribault elementary students. Support for student mental health, develops a comprehensive plan for mental health support for Faribault Public School students and staff. Support all students with our equity component of our strategic plan goal, ensures a coordinated, system-wide plan to achieve equity for all students. Plan has been developed and implemented, including strategies for meaningful engagement of students and staff from diverse communities and backgrounds, strategies for recruiting diverse staff, closing the achievement gap, and providing staff development. There was an agreement among the board that Superintendent Sesker did a good job making progress toward the 3 goals that we set for him. COVID-19 continued to disrupt the school year. However, plans are in place for the upcoming school year to launch new programs at all 3 elementary schools. We were able to hire a mental health coordinator and several additional counselors in an effort to support students' emotional health and social needs. We have continued to provide professional development and training for our leadership and other staff members as we move our student success plan forward. Overall, Mr. Sesker's performance on these 3 goals was effective. Mr. Sesker is retiring from the Faribault Public Schools after leading the district successfully through the recent COVID-19 pandemic and several years of necessary budget cuts. To create this summary, feedback was collected from 6 of the 7 members of the Faribault School Board. This summary evaluation reflects school board input and evidence collected throughout the evaluation process. Summary conclusions of the evaluation will be shared at the next open school board meeting. That's right now. The formative evaluation and summative evaluation are placed in the superintendent's personnel file. Chad Wolf, Chairperson, Faribault School Board. We have a motion and a second for approval of the superintendent evaluation summary discussion. Dr. Robichaud.
Vice Chair, maybe I was incorrect, but I don't believe Ms. Yocum was in that closed session. Were you?
No. So we should strike that from the record, from that, okay? I'm just reading what Mr. Wolf.
Yeah, no, I understand.
We'll take care of that. Thank you. Any further discussion? Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. Agenda item 15G, consider approval of superintendent goals for 2022 to 2023 for Mr. Jamie Benty. Motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Lechtenberg.
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Steves, for the second. Discussion, as you see by, I believe, we have 3 goals. Mr. Benty, do you wish to, I think we've already talked about this in work session, but reflect on any of those? I think 3 is a very workable number and things that are important to the district here, so.
Yeah, looking over the goals that were set, first I want to thank the members that were helping set the goals. I think these goals not only help me to grow, but also are very aligned with the mission and vision and strategy points for the district. So I think that it's going to match up very well with our work for this upcoming school year.
Excellent. Board members, any further discussion? Discussion?
We're excited to work with you, Jamie, on these, and we're all here to support you as well. But looking forward to seeing your work this year.
Thank you, Ms. Cavalier. I would like to thank the Superintendent Evaluation Committee. I believe it's Dr. Robichaud, Mr. Wolf, and Ms. Cavalier, correct, on that for all your work in doing Mr. Seskers and now setting the goals for Mr. Benty as well. So, Mr. Olson.
Are we doing a mid-year? January?
It will be January again. I think, Mr. Olson, you're correct. Yes, I think we pretty well established that now in practice and in policy, I do believe, so we're good. Ms. Steves, roll call, please.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. Move on to 15H, consider approval of cooperative sponsorship review of boys soccer, girls soccer, and gymnastics. So entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Robichaud. And do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Steves. And discussion. So board members, you can see we received the data as requested. I requested that a week ago, and we received that midweek from Mr. Kleiner. So does anyone have any points of discussion? Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I will support this. Again, I think we should have cooperatives with every private school in our district. They're all students. When they play on our soccer team or football team or gymnastics, they are a Falcon. So I do not support what that vote was back in November of 2020 about this decision tree. I think it's wrong. I think
Mr. Olson, the motion and second is for approval of the cooperative sponsorship. I think your comments right now and going back there are not pertinent to the motion on the floor.
I think it is.
I disagree.
Okay, then how do we resolve this?
You have a motion and a second to approve the cooperative sponsorship review. So here's where we're at.
Cut off again.
Further discussion? I do appreciate the data as I requested. Again, the gymnastics, which is cooperative on there, those numbers concern me greatly, and I think we've brought up some points with that as well to possibly expand that program again, my viewpoint on this, and it is not changed. Our guidelines are with the Minnesota State High School League and the decision tree here in looking at the data. Girls soccer, we have 17 with one possibly in the co-op, 18, and we're going to have 2 teams out of 18 according to this data. So personally, I do not see and I do not understand how adding the co-op or not adding the co-op could result in cutting of Faribault students. Been a coach way too long to know that that could work differently, but it should work differently, but that's just it. So that's just my viewpoints. Again, I'll just stick by what I've said in previous meetings throughout the year. So with that. Ms. Cavalier, do you have anything?
Overall, I'm struggling with this issue. I don't like the feeling of a roller coaster, and that's kind of what I feel like I'm on with it. I do appreciate that Chair Wolf continues to remind us to look sport by sport. I do think it's hard to consider the co-ops with the definition changing from staffing a team to now being able to run a fully fledged program with multiple levels of teams. That isn't really something we talked about previously. So I'm struggling overall with this. I want the best for the kids too. So I think it's really important that we do maintain process. So that's I've got to trust in the recommendations of the district staff on this one, but I am struggling overall with that.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Ms. Steves, please, roll call.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. John Bellingham,
Nay.
passes 5-1.
Thank you. Move on to item number 16, other items of information, report school board members. Again, just a reminder that now August 8th, there will also be a special meeting. I'm wondering, Mr. Benty, if we need to make a motion to have a special meeting?
I'm a little concerned on our time allotment for that evening because now we're going to be scheduled to have a special business meeting, a work meeting, and a closed meeting. So we have our closed safety meeting at 7:30 that evening.
Are we able to call a special meeting at a different time outside of the 8th?
Yes, we can.
The chair and the clerk may call a special meeting. So I say let's refer this back to Chair Wolf. When he comes back, and maybe Chair Wolf and you as clerk, Ms. Steves can, Chair Wolf, you guys will contact you board members will contact the other board members, seeing what we can work out for a time and call a special meeting. It could be morning, afternoon, whatever with that, and go from there, right? So let's do that.
Okay.
In that part, so we know with that. Just for information from, I'm sorry, Ms. Cavalier, like Ms. Lechtenberg, Mr. Olson, Dr. Robichaud, Ms. Steves, anybody have anything else they'd like to share? Mr. Olson?
On August 8th, are we going to have that safety or not?
Yes, sir.
Does that by law have to be recorded?
If it's a closed meeting, it does, yes.
Okay, so it's taped.
Mhm.
And we're going to talk about safety, strategies, right? Who can view that tape? I mean, anybody can, then that's my concern, is that it's all on tape. Could somebody check with our attorney? Is that anybody can come in and view that? What good is that if it closed?
I think it's 2 years, well, that's negotiations, 2 years after. We'll check with the attorney, it has to be recorded, but I think basically in something like this, much like anything else, it's on a need-to-know basis. So I don't think that maybe the general public, because it's a safety meeting and with protocols, et cetera, of Faribault Public Schools, I think there's just a need to know with
Could you
that.
check
So
into that?
Yeah, we're going to need to check into that.
Could you? Because public or even the newspaper could. Then all of a sudden they print stuff. It just, then why do we have a closed meeting?
because the meeting was requested and to
Yeah,
have.
which I want to close, but again, not our strategies to be let out.
No.
That's all.
Need to know, yeah. That's right. Okay. We'll get that information to you, Mr.
Thank you.
Olson.
Thank you.
Anything else, board members? Items of information? From me here, just an item of information on, I've arranged with Ms. Zavarol that August 1st and August 4th, from 5:30 to 6:30, is the school board, we're going to call it school board candidate seminar. And lucky me, I'll be presenting that. It'll be about 45 minutes to an hour. Questions, I've just developed a couple page points from MSBA and things we've experienced on the board over the years, et cetera. So people who are interested in running for school board or want to know what the school board is about, come right here on those dates, 5:30 to 6:30. I vision about 45 minutes myself and those questions and go from there. Concern is board members, if you show up when then it's more than 4, we have a meeting, so whatever. My understanding right now, it will just be live, be doing on YouTube or live on Zoom, so it'll be just here, okay? So that's those 2 dates we've worked out with that. Other than that, I don't have anything else. I'd just like to thank everyone for being prepared and going through all these options, et cetera. I know it's quite stressful, but in the big picture, we want to and we need to get it right. That's with the levy and those things like that. So thank you for that. Superintendent Benty.
So day 25 on the job. I will say that I've learned more about taxes and levies and the different types of levies and the different types of referendums and tax years and everything. Mr. Gertis and I have what started out as a weekly meeting and has now become an every other day meeting where we just sit and discuss. But I will say the conversation that's going on here is really great, and the ability to say that you want to see 6 options, I think, is the strength of this board, because it shows the community that you are literally exploring every possible option for the district and for the community. So I applaud the board for that. Just from a personal standpoint, I've been acclimating well to the job. People at the district office have been treating me well, -1. But no, things have been going very well. I'm settling in, learning a lot. And then just some of the pieces today, as Nort Johnson was here talking about the H2C program. It's amazing the cooperation between the school district, South Central College, and the chamber. I had a call from one of our industrial tech teachers today that said, these are the pieces of equipment that I am now going to have access to simply because of the cooperation between these 3 entities that did not happen a few years ago. So it's just something that is really growing within this district, and I think is showing the strength is the cooperation and the ability to work together between all of the entities in town. So,
Thank you, Mr. Venti. Item 17, dates to remember, August 2nd, 2022, 3:30 p.m. is the policy meeting. August 8th, 2022, 5:30 is the work session. August 8th, 2022, 7:30 p.m. a closed session, safety discussion. August 15th, 2022, 7:30 a.m. Finance Committee meeting. And August 22nd, 2022, 5:30 p.m. is our board meeting for August. With that, item number 18, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second. Roll call, Ms. Steves.
Boy, that was quick.
I wanted to second something all night, so there we are.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Leon Lechtenberg,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye, John Bellingham,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bellingham, for your leadership.
yes,
Welcome.
thank you.
You're gonna be gone in a second.